On a dusty dockside shelf I saw it, a brass tide key carved like it belonged to a machine, not a door. Old Sutter called it worthless. Ember knew better. That night, I woke choking, fists clenched, heart racing. Then Ember pinned me down, steady breathing, dragging mine back. She padded to the hearth, claws tapping stone, until, click, a secret seam answered. Tidermarrow Ledge was not just rock. It was waiting to be opened. They said Tidermarrow Ledge was just black rock that forgot the mainland. The maps left it blank. The fishermen left it alone. I came out here to disappear. Nights are when the noise comes back. Not the ocean, the other noise. The kind you bring home from places nobody vacations. I woke choking on it, fists tight, heart punching like it had orders. Then a warm weight landed on my chest and refused to move. Ember, 9 years old, silver sable, the only partner who still takes my calls at 3 a.m. She breathed slow until I had to match her pace. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3. The cabin settled around us, timber joints ticking in the cold. Quiet, too quiet. Like a range going cold right before the wrong thing happens. Ember slid off the cot and padded to the fireplace. No bark, no drama. She put her nose to the stone and started to work. Pour, pause, pour. Not frantic, measured. The scrape of claw on granite made a thin, bright sound that kept repeating in the same places, like she was reading the rock in braille. Then, under her rhythm, a second sound answered, a tiny metallic kiss from somewhere under the hearth. "Show me," I said, voice still shredded. She didn't look back. The tail went level. The ears found a frequency. I ran my thumb along the base stones. Cold, rough, honest, until it wasn't. A seam, hair-thin, broke the honesty. Someone had drawn a rectangle where there shouldn't be one, then taught it to keep its mouth shut. I should tell you how I even got to this ledge with a dog and a key nobody else wanted. That started hours earlier, when the ferry nosed into Sutter's dock like a tired horse. Old Sutter didn't use names much, but he knew faces and dogs. "That ledge hears things men shouldn't," he muttered at the line cleat, like he was apologizing to the water for selling me a ticket. Then he shambled into his shack and started folding the same rag over the same clean counter, waiting for me to say what everyone else pretended not to know. On his junk shelf, between a cracked ship's bell and a jar of marbles, sat a brass thing the size of my palm. T-handle, cylindrical shaft, grooves cut with the patience of a watchmaker. Not a door key, a tide key, if you believed the old man's stories. "How much?" I asked. "For that worthless paperweight?" Sutter tried to smile and failed. 50, and you don't bring it back if it sings. It felt good in the hand. Old metal always does when it remembers why it was made. Behind me, the cafe quieted just enough for me to notice. Averted eyes, checkbooks that didn't open. Ember watched them the way soldiers watch alleys. We paid cash and left to a chorus of nothing. Back in the cabin, the wind braided itself through the rafters, and the stovepipe ticked like a metronome with bad nerves. I set the brass on my palm to figure out which kind of lie I'd just bought. It warmed, not hot, not a trick of the stove. A slow, steady rise like a heartbeat you didn't know you were touching. Ember's nose went back to the hearth. Pour. Pause. Pour. The metal in my hand hummed so soft you could blame it on blood. Then, click. The sound came from the stone, not the key. A quiet mechanical yes that you only hear if you've learned to listen for detonators, safeties, and other verdicts. "All right," I told the rock. "We'll do it your way." I fetched the breaker bar, eased the flat edge into that seam Ember had underlined, and leaned my shoulder into history. Granite argued like granite does, slow, stubborn, loud. Then the slab lifted a breath, old pitch tearing in long black threads, and the hearth exhaled cold air that had never met the sea. Inside the cavity was no pirate's chest. It didn't need to be. A tin signature box sat there, painted army green once, dark as a bruise now. Beside it, wrapped in oilskin that still wept a little at the folds, a journal waited like it had all the time in the world. Ember sat. That's her version of a salute. I hauled the box up and set it on the table. Its latch gave after a polite argument. Inside, samples, tags, tiny vials corked and waxed, neat labels in a hand that cared about dates and coordinates more than it cared about anything else. The kind of order you only keep if you're trying to tell the truth to someone who won't be in the room when you are. I unwrapped the journal last, the leather peeled back, and there it was in the first careful lines. Elliot Mercer, my grandfather. The one family called stubborn until he stopped being in the way. 8 decades of tide notes and sound maps and sketches of a place he kept naming over and over like prayer beads. Tidermarrow Ledge. He wrote about a device you don't point at enemies. You point it at the horizon and listen. Listen, not hunt, he'd underlined, as if someone had already argued the other side and brought blueprints. If this sounds like the part where I turn into a different man, it isn't. PTSD has its own weather. You don't fix the climate overnight. You learn where to stand when the thunder comes. Ember is my shelter. When that old stupid panic climbs my spine like a burglar, she leans harder. When my breath starts sprinting toward a wall, she drags it back through her ribs. That night, with the oilskin flaking on my fingers and the brass cooling in my palm, she put her head on my knee, not to ask, to take weight. I kept reading. Old Sutter had been right about one thing. This ledge hears. Elliot proved it in margins and math. Low-frequency paths, arcing across a shelf, whale songs braided with storm groans. Human signatures you could follow if you knew which part of the ocean preferred to keep secrets. His drawings turned from instruments to instructions. Dog watch, low tide, arrows by hand, coordinates that made a map inside a map. He didn't write like a man hiding treasure. He wrote like a sentry, leaving you his post orders. I flipped a page, and something slid free. A photograph, sun-bled and thin as a dry leaf. Elliot stood in it on this same ledge, eyes to weather, and beside him, a German shepherd, thick-coated, ears like radar, steady as a gun mount. Kaiser, the pencil scrawl said. Ember nosed the photo, then looked up at me like she understood more than the ink did. I said it out loud because sometimes you have to hear it to make it true. We didn't find this by accident. The brass in my hand thrummed again, a low murmur I felt more than heard. Ember's eyes went back to the hearth. She touched her nose to a second seam I hadn't appreciated yet, smaller, higher, like a whisper nested inside a whisper. Click. The cabin answered. In the journal, Elliot's handwriting sharpened. The line pressure changed the way it does when a man decides his pen is an oath. I turned back to the first page and read the sentence I'd been avoiding since I saw the name. Only the dog and the sea will tell you the truth. Listen to both. Outside, the water shifted as if it had been named. The tide turned in the dark the way it always does, patient and old. Somewhere inside the ledge, something else turned with it. I closed my eyes and let the 2 metronomes sink, the dog's breath and the ocean's pull. For the first time since I set foot on Tidermarrow, the quiet in the room wasn't a threat, it was an instruction. I poured coffee I didn't need and found the part of me that still liked tools. The key, if that's what it was, wasn't for this hole. That much was clear. Elliot had built big. The map in his notes didn't point to my hearth. It pointed to the western rocks, where 3 fingers of granite made a black trident when the tide fell hard. Dogwatch, low tide, a place where stone remembers. But that was for when the sea allowed it. For now I traced the coordinates with a thumb and felt the page's ridges like scars. Ember leaned against my leg, heavier than physics, and the stove settled into its slow iron breathing. The photographs, the vials, the ink, they weren't ghosts, they were invitations. I slid the box back into the pocket, replaced the slab, brushed ash across the seam the way Elliot had done a dozen times before. The journal stayed above ground. Some truths you don't put back once you've heard them. On the last page I touched, between a sketch of a coin-sized socket and a tide table that ended in 3 underlines, Elliot had written a single word in the margin, like a dare to anyone who made it this far. Listen. Ember's tail thumped once against my boot. The cabin, the ledge, the black water past the window, they all held their breath together, waiting to see if I would. I did. And the island finally decided to answer. The first line on the first page stops me cold. Only the dog and the sea will tell you the truth. Listen to both. Elliot Mercer didn't waste ink. The handwriting is neat and spare, a sailor's discipline trapped in paper. I run a thumb along the groove where the nib bit harder on truth, like he leaned in as if the ocean itself might eavesdrop. Ember settles against my shin, weight warm, breath steady. The gale has fallen back to a damp hiss outside. The cabin ticks the way wood does when it remembers it's alive. I keep reading. Elliot writes about a ledge no map would admit, a granite tooth northwest of town that the old men called Tidermarrow, because it kept the sea's marrow in its bones. He writes about sound, how low frequencies thread themselves through water and stone until the world becomes an instrument. He writes about building something that listens, not hunts, a place to hold watch, not to aim. A brittle slip flutters out and lands face down on the plank floor. I lift it carefully. It's a photograph, sun-faded and salt-bled, the kind you print in a darkroom because secrets deserve chemistry. Elliot stands on a black rock headland in a wool watch cap, hand on the ruff of a German shepherd. The dog's coat is silver sable, mask pale, ears pricked like questions. For a beat, my chest forgets how to move. Ember and the dog in the picture could be mirror and echo. You're not the first, I tell her. Ember blinks, the amber of her eyes catching firelight. She doesn't preen, doesn't pose. She just leans, the way she always does when the dark tries to climb. The journal shifts from story to fieldcraft. A penciled header, dogwatch, low tide. Beneath it, coordinates in a steady script, a small arrowed sketch of a jagged cliff with 3 prongs. Crude trident, labelled W. A margin note. Sea breathes out, stone size. Keyed socket, coin size. West face. Another underline under dogwatch. Ember's chest rumbles, not warning, not fear. Purpose. She rises and pads to the hearth as if to say, stop reading it, start living it. I set the journal down and take the brass thing from my pocket. Tide key, Sutter had called it, like it belonged to the moon instead of a man. The metal has taken my heat. It sits in my palm as if it remembers where it's meant to go. We pack like we're heading out on patrol. Lantern, spare batteries, knife, rope, the journal in a dry bag. And Ember watches without pacing, head tilted slightly to track every object from table to pack. When panic breathes at the edge of my vision, she edges in closer until I take a deeper breath than the one before. The rhythm resets. Out we go. The world beyond the door wears its November. Sky pewter and low. The Atlantic shouldering itself against rock until spray turns to smoke. The path down is a spill of wet needles and roots and half-buried boulders. Ember leads, not by charging, but by choosing, the line a smart dog picks when she's spent a lifetime reading wind and ground. She pauses at forks and glances back, giving me the courtesy of command. I nod. She moves. Lantern light makes a honeyed halo of her fur as dusk drifts toward tide change. I hold the journal open under my coat, checking the crude trident sketch against what the cliff throws at us. The wind smears sound into one long sheet until now, and then the ocean tears it with a ripper wave, and you hear the belly of the ledge talk. Hollow notes tucked inside the roar, the way you hear a heartbeat through a wall if you press the bones of your skull to it. We clear the last stand of scrub. The sea decides to show its mechanics. The tide falls like a stage curtain, a few inches at first, then a foot that makes new shore where there wasn't any a minute ago. Ember goes tall, tail level, ears forward, eyes locked west, as if someone just said 10 hut in a language she was born knowing. There it is. The black-ribbed cliff runs out and then down, and in the fresh wet sheen of rock a shape declares itself, a 3-pronged jut like a pitchfork laid on its side. The sketch in Eliot's book was crude on purpose. The real thing doesn't need art. It glistens the colour of oil and night, kelp combed off it like hair. The air tastes like iron filings and salt. We pick our way along a narrow seam of shelf, the sea to our knees on our right, the cliff to our left like a cathedral wall. The lantern throws a small universe that moves with us. Outside it, the world is nothing but the Atlantic deciding who stays. Ember places each paw as if the ledge might reject her if she stomps. Her nails tick stone without hurry. I keep a hand on her harness, both for her and for me, because being tethered to something you trust is its own kind of light. The hollow note deepens when we reach the west face. It isn't louder, it's truer. Sound turns more bone than air. Ember brings her nose to the stone, inhales, shifts 6 inches, inhales again. She stops at a place that looks like all the other places if your eyes are the only tool you brought. She touches it once with the bare leather of her nose, then looks up at me, more question than plea. The journal said coin size, west face. I sweep the lantern low and let shadow do what sunlight can't, tell the truth about depth. There, a perfect circle, the diameter of a silver dollar, cut so clean into the granite that the sea couldn't be bothered to fill it with a single grain. I touch it. Cold that feels like old metal, not stone. My heart does 2 dumb fast beats, and then remembers it's brief. The brass key fits like the first click of a hand you know. I don't have to force it. The handle is a T, ribbed where a glove might slip, and the shaft is cut with interlocking grooves that refer to something older than hinges. Eliot called it a key, because we need metaphors we can hold, but in my hand it feels less like a thing for a door, and more like the part of a machine that makes all the other parts agree. Last chance to vote no, I say. Ember plants, weight forward, the quiet of her body more answer than bark. I turn. There's resistance, but it isn't stubborn. It's ceremonial, like a safe that wants a second of proof you meant it. The metal turns, the circle swallows the key, and somewhere deeper than the wall, a latch finds its counterpoint. The cliff does something no cliff should. It inhales. Air comes at us from stone. Dry, cold, faintly metallic like an old battery. The sea's breath is wet and salted. This is different, private, kept. Kelp slides off a seam that isn't a seam anymore, and rock edges draw an outline around a rectangle where there wasn't one a heartbeat ago. The pitch of the hollow note drops half a step, as if the ledge just added a chamber to its throat and wants us to hear it sing properly. Water rushes in and out of my boots. I don't notice. I pull the lantern close, shield it with my body, and hold it up as the seam widens to a line, and the line divides into a door. Ember doesn't surge forward. She glances at me once, quick, checking, all business, then squares herself to the opening. Her breath fogs and disappears in the draft. The little clouds pulled toward darkness, like the tunnel is thirsty for warm air. The key stops turning on its own, and the stone finishes the rest without me, retreating on hidden rollers I can't hear, but can feel through the soles of my feet. The world beyond is black and exact. Not a cave, not a natural throat, but something cut with patience and math. I can smell metal, dust that has forgotten rain, Oil that has lived a long time on bearings that never saw daylight. Elliot wrote, "Listen, not hunt." The opening in front of us doesn't look like it knows how to shoot. It looks like it was built to remember. The sea thumps the ledge behind us. The lamp sputters and steadies. I swallow hard enough to hear it and touch Ember's shoulder with 2 fingers, the way I used to signal on me when the next room mattered. She flicks an ear, shifts half an inch closer, and waits for the word I don't say out loud, because some doors deserve quiet. The last inch of stone slides back, the breath of the island washing our faces colder than the wind off the water, and for a heartbeat everything pauses. Me, the dog, the sea, like we're standing at the lip of a held note, the moment before a chorus decides whether to rise. The door finishes breathing open and holds, the draft drawing our warmth into the dark like a tide. I palm the lantern higher, and the flame steadies as if it understands. Small light, big job. Ember takes 1 step, waits for my boot to tap her shoulder, then slips through the threshold. The floor isn't rock. Her nails tick a grid, steel grate, slightly oily, the kind of texture you get when machines are meant to run forever. The sound travels ahead of us and comes back in soft copies, like someone walking our walk a half-second behind. I think of Elliot's note, listen, not hunt, and realize this hallway listens to us. The air is colder, drier, edged with a metallic tang that lives in batteries and bearings. I keep my hand on Ember's harness. She moves steady, not eager. Duty's pace, not bravado. Geometry replaces cave. The walls are clean cut, corners trued like a shipfitter's dream. We pass a low plaque at knee height with minute tick marks. It looks like a ruler for pressure, not distance. Farther in, the dark lightens itself. A dim pearl glow waking 1 segment at a time along the ceiling. Each tube blooming to life a breath after we enter its reach. It feels like a heart-finding rhythm. Lub, haul, dub, haul, steady. Ember lifts her muzzle into it, tasting the heat haze of old bulbs, and keeps us centered. Footfalls echo, mine and hers, and a 3rd pair walks in memory. I see 2 ghosts for a step. Elliot in his watch cap, Kaiser at heel. Then the blink goes and it's just me and Ember, present tense. But the feeling remains. We are not the first, we are simply the ones on watch now. A bulkhead door waits with a wheel in its middle, paint the color of battleships under sea. Dust hasn't found it. Rust hasn't either. I set the lantern on the deck, wrap the wheel with both hands, and try. It turns like someone oiled it this morning. A sigh of equalizing air slips around the seal. The door swings inward, and a room the size of a small chapel unfurls. Curved walls ringed in consoles, a central panel like a horizon cut into glass. Catwalks stepping down to lower bays. The place hums at the low note of confidence. Ember steps in and sits without being told, her back straight, ears high, gaze moving not in quick darts, but in slow sweeps. A sentry claiming a post. I follow her eyes. There are no cobwebs, no rodent nests. Dust lies only where humans would expect to see it, and not where machines require it to be absent. Obsession kept this place alive. Near the primary board, a small brass plaque gleams clean as a coin. I wipe it with my sleeve anyway. Letters rise, stamped, simple. Use it to protect, not to profit. The words ring the way orders do when nobody's around to argue. I feel something in my hands unclench, some tremor that has lived there since sand and sirens, quiet a notch. Jobs with edges will do that. You know where to stand. You know what not to do. The glass panel wakes when I touch the frame. No button, just skin and chance. A faint line crawls across it, then resolves to a map that is not a map, more like a living sonogram of the coast. Shelves and trenches traced in colour I don't have names for. The room keeps its voice low, as if not to wake whatever the world above is dreaming about. Ember rises and does a deliberate circuit. Door, ladder, vent, the shallow drip pan under a bank of cabinets. She isn't hunting. She's establishing perimeter the way she learned when the world was shaped like checkpoints. She stops at a rack of old-school toggles and cloth-insulated wires, nose touching a brass lever labelled, in Elliot's neat hand, Ariel, listen. She looks at me once. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd trapped and set 2 fingers on the lever, but I don't pull. Not yet. We'll earn the right, I say. Ember accepts the delay with a blink and parks by the comms set as if she's found the seat with her name on it. I walk the ring, taking inventory. The tidal feed is the heartbeat here. Meters in a corner show draw and reserve. Needle rock steady in the green. No mainland line. The ocean pays the power bill. The moon handles collections. Cue a stupid smile I can't help. Elliot built stubborn. A leather-bound log, oil-skinned twin of the journal upstairs, rests in a recess with a pencil still sharp. The last entry is decades old and somehow fresh. Operational checks, minute drift notes, a quiet complaint about seals he'll freshen next blow. He wrote as if tomorrow was certain. Maybe it was, for a while. Okay, I tell the room, and maybe the sea. We understand the oath. I touch the main console's edge, a ritual, a handshake, then set the lantern down where it won't offend anything older than me. The bulkhead behind us makes a small noise, not a knock, not wind, something deeper, the rotational click of dogs seating into cams, a lock finishing a decision. I glance back in time to see the wheel turn a 1/4 inch by itself and stop, like the station just decided closed is safer. Lights over the power tree string themselves from ember to steady glow. Somewhere below, a relay clacks, a knuckle crack you feel more than hear, and the hum lifts half a tone, clean, synchronized. Elliot planned for return, but not applause. He did it the way good engineers love. If the right hands arrive, the room recognizes the rhythm. The locks rotate on their own. Power stands up, straight-backed. Systems that should be fossil are suddenly present. Ember cocks her head at the door, then at me, a question wrapped in trust. My answer is simple. I turn back to the board and, gentle, bring the listening up one more breath. The bulkhead finishes its own thought, locks settling, power smoothing out like a jet at cruising altitude, and the station takes a fuller breath. Ember tips an ear at the change, then begins her methodical sweep. Door seam, ladder well, vent throat, drip pan, the margins where trouble likes to nest. Nose works, ears angle, tail writes quiet questions in the air. First night in the wire, her body knows the drill. Satisfied, she chooses a place beside the old comms rack and sits like she's claimed a radio watch. I circle the main board. Up close, it's an artifact that refuses to be one. Bakelite knobs, brass bezels, bolt heads with no rust bloom. The screws are indexed. Every slot aligned the same direction like a monastery of hardware. 80 years should smell like mouse and mildew. It smells like ozone and discipline. Whoever kept this alive loved it the way some people love orchards. Daily, invisibly, for the fruit no one else sees. A frame hangs in shadow above the starboard console. I lift the lantern. The glass throws back a tired copy of me before the image resolves. Elliot, windshot grin, crooked under a knit cap, and at his knee, a German shepherd, darker, heavier through the shoulders. Kaiser is stamped in pencil on the mat. The dog's eyes are Ember's eyes, steel softened by loyalty, and for a second, the room tilts. Coincidence is for gamblers. We're past that. Under our boots, the hum leans warmer. A side panel labelled Tidal Regulators ticks once and holds. A narrow needle rests dead centre in the green. No mainland feed anywhere. The ocean pays the power bill. The moon's the accountant. It's such a stubborn, elegant idea that I feel a laugh slip out before I can stop it. And then something strange happens. My hands, which shake on bad days without asking my permission, go still. Not by command, not by force. still because the room gives them a job with edges. Switch here, check there, listen. Don't hunt. For the first time since Sand and Sirens, I belong to a task that can be done well or poorly. Ember watches me notice my own calm, then leans her shoulder against my shin for the smallest second, as if to say good. She leaves me and pads to a brass lever I hadn't clocked. 2 knuckles to the right of the comms set. Label plate engraved in Elliot's tidy hand. Ariel, listen. Ember noses it once, deliberate, and looks up. You're the door, I'm the key? I ask her. And the station, and maybe Elliot. I wrap my fingers around the cool metal and ease it down. The room doesn't explode with sound. It blooms. A low choir swells from speakers inset along the curved bulkhead, so deep it appears first in bone. Long, slow vowels at the bottom of hearing, punctuated by delicate grit. Shrimp crackle, rain as static, the shelf groaning under the weight of a passing storm 100 miles away. This is what Elliot meant, the ocean speaking in infrastructure. I bring up the gain a hair. The floor seems to get larger without moving. The glass panel wakes in layers, false colour unfurling like a tide chart dreamed by a painter. Shelves become weather, trenches bruise and unbruise, shipping lanes appear as patient chords. Ember's head follows the line of a passing tone, the way a hunter follows a bird through brush. She settles into the posture I know from panic drills, relaxed alert, watching the middle distance for the thing that shouldn't be there. I test the comms gently. The mic has the heft of a museum piece and the teeth of a tool meant to last. I don't key it, not yet. Instead, I page through Elliot's field cards tucked under a lip of the console. Night drift. Swell period longer than forecast. Whale song corridor open. Keep torch passive. Torch? He wrote it like the word belonged here. A torch can be a light you hold up so others can find you, or a brand you wave to make the dark back up. Elliot's notes treat it like a position, not a flare. Keep torch passive, be findable, not aimable. I set the card down, check the power tree, batteries topped, draw steady, regulators comfortable, and log the moment in the oil-skinned book, because men like Elliot built rituals for a reason. Entry reads simple. Initial power up by air, systems nominal, listening posture assumed, no transmit. Ember disagrees with no as an absolute. She stands, puts her chin on the lip of the comms shelf and shifts her weight until the lever brushes my knuckles again. I get it. Listening isn't passive if you never nod back. I key the mic for a heartbeat and release it. The board's needle dips and returns. The room waits. Tidermarrow Ledge, local, I say, voice low enough to keep from spooking the dog or the dead. Torch is lit, passive. We're not hunting, we're watching. I let go. The carrier sighs out. Silence returns, not quite the same silence. The continental shelf keeps singing. Far under the low choir, a glottal tick repeats, thermal somewhere flexing like a knuckle in cold weather. A long, stately tone threads the noise. Merchantman well south, beating time like a pendulum. A sharper, faster rhythm to the west. Wind pushing chop into a place the map calls unwise. Nothing wrong, nothing special. Just a billion tons of water doing physics outside our concerns. It's almost kind. I rise and stretch the tightness out of my back, then follow Ember to the edge of the mezzanine to look down into the service bay below. A ladder drops to a narrow catwalk, then another, to a bank of converters with tidy paint stencils. Every cable run is lashed at perfect intervals. Elliot's hands live here. I can see where he swapped a regulator and kept the old brass tag because the numbers were pretty. I can see where he rewrapped cloth insulation with the exact same cotton tape Navy rigs used in photos older than my father. If obsession had a smell, it would smell like this. Flux and oil, an absolute refusal to let things die. Thank you, I tell a man who hasn't answered in years. Ember's ear flicks at the word, and she lifts her eyes to the ceiling, the way dogs do when they listen to what you mean instead of what you said. Back at the main console, I lower the aerial. Listen, lever a fraction more. The choir swells, not louder, truer. The room's curves do work, focusing certain bands the way a lens will persuade light. I hear a shape I don't have language for, a hollow vowel deeper than wails, slower than surf, and realize it's the shelf breathing over a canyon nobody's named out loud. The hair on my arms stands up. I am listening to a place the way you listen to a person you love when they talk in their sleep. Then, almost too soft to be meaning, the static changes. Not volume, intention. A filament-thin strand of sound threads the noise and tightens, like someone finding focus through a storm window. Ember's head snaps toward the comms rack. I follow. The text lamp, an afterthought little rectangle of milk glass, gives a single shy blink. Once, then again. The speaker doesn't cough. The mic doesn't echo. The lamp simply tints greener than the room and holds. I tap the metal bezel. It isn't stuck. The green warms and letters, blocky, military, humble, push themselves into the shallow pane. Hold that torch. We're listening. No call sign, no handshake, no agency. Just 4 words and a period in a room that loves disciplined brevity. Ember's tail lifts and stills. I feel responsibility and relief arrive in the same breath. Out there, in whatever quiet corner Elliot trusted, somebody kept an ear for this place. And for us. I don't thumb the mic. Not yet. Listening first isn't weakness. It's respect. I rest my palm on the console's edge, and for a second the steel under my skin feels warmer, the way a handrail feels warmer when someone else has just climbed the stairs. We are not alone. The station knows it. The sea already did. My dog knew first. The little milk glass lamp holds its breath on green. Ember stands so close to the comms shelf, her whiskers nearly touch the bezel. I let the quiet run a full count, then thumb the mic and keep my voice as level as a horizon. Tidermarrow local. Torches lit. Passive posture. We're not hunting. We're watching. Carrier sighs off. The room waits with us. Somewhere in the low choir, a long tone drifts by, patient as a ship you'll never see. Ember's ears angle, left, then forward, on a sound that's more intention than noise. The lamp warms again. No voice, just letters pushing up through green like grass through frost. Keep it passive. You are not alone. The bulb dims a shade. Ember flicks her eyes to me. Well? I don't have an answer for the part of the sentence that wasn't printed. Who else? Another set of ears. Another station. Elliot's network still humming under the skin of the coast. I feel the old field sensation land, being part of a larger shape you can't yet see. Metal answers itself somewhere beyond the bulkhead, soft, dry, a whisper of mass, touching mass. Ember's hackles lift a single ridge, no bark. She points with her whole body at the east service corridor, forepaw a fraction off the grate, nose like a compass needle. I kill the speaker gain to taste the room clean and hear it again. A thin scuff against the auxiliary hatch, then the gentlest tick of a spring remembering its job. Not wind, not geology. Hands. I clip the lantern to my belt and nod. Ember ghosts ahead, pads silent along the catwalk, stops at the hatch and breathes the seam. Her tail stiffens into a line. The wheel shows nothing but grease and care. I lay my palm on cold metal. The pressure on the other side withdraws, like a person reconsidering a bad idea. I give the wheel an 8th turn, just enough to seat the dogs, and throw Elliot's guarded rotary to local only. If someone's touching our door, they can touch only steel, not our power. We climb. The shaft to topside is a damp throat of ladders and rungs. Light thins as we rise to the shuttered boathouse. Then the last trap lifts and we are in air, grey, Salt, the ledge breathing its tide-timed breath. Ember tastes wind, then pins her gaze on the approach track that winds down from the headland. I hear the tired complaint of a V8 long before its shape hammers over the last rise. A county cruiser rattles into the yard, like it has already argued with a few miles of potholes. The windshield is spiderwebbed from a high-centered rock or from a mistake someone else arranged. Sheriff Pike unfolds from the driver's seat with the careful casual of a man who likes to be read as inevitable. His smile shows all the teeth a dentist can claim. His eyes do not smile. "Afternoon," he calls over the wind, palming his hat against the gust. "That structure you've got there, does it enjoy the company of permits?" He means the weathered shack that covers a hatch that covers a tunnel no clerk has a form for. Ember steps half a pace in front of me and plants her stance, not aggressive, just sure. "Afternoon," I say. "If there's a form for rocks and air, I'll file it." "Right." He takes in the dog the way a man takes in a locked door, evaluating hinges. This parcel carries responsibilities, inspections, safety. Some folks don't appreciate the hazards of coastal properties. He is fishing without bait, waiting to see which part of the line I'll bite. I let silence do the work. Ember keeps her eyes on his belt hand, not the gun, the hand. Pike shifts his weight, looks past me toward the shed, then at the track he came down. "That windscreen," I say, like a man wasting small talk. "Long day?" "Rock jumped up," he says. The line sounds practiced. He huffs, tugs at one cuff, then glances down at his cruiser like he's remembered something that should be true but isn't. The rear tires look fine until you kneel. Ember gets there first. She lowers her head to the sidewall, breathes, and makes a sound that isn't a growl so much as a verdict. I see it then. 2 neat kisses in the rubber, just off the rim line, angled so the leak blooms slow, not catastrophic, not vandalism. Engineering. Someone wanted this car to need help, not a tow. Someone wanted him to linger. "Hell," Pike says softly, like a compliment he didn't mean to give the world. He looks at me to see if the surprise is shared. I keep my face on the weather. Ember shifts her weight so her shoulder touches my boot for a heartbeat. "Not yours." "Got a compressor?" he asks, almost sheepish. It's a test either way. Share a tool, share a room, refuse. Make an enemy early. I've got patch kits, and a gate that likes to stay shut in winter squalls. We work against the wind in the performance both of us understands, the ritual of men who can fix small things while they avoid naming larger ones. Up close, Pike smells like coffee gone hard, and the cheap hand soap county offices buy in 50-gallon drums. He watches Ember without looking like he's watching. Ember watches the headland. The patch would buy him a town trip if town wanted him. It doesn't. He straightens, thanks me with a half-inch of nod, and lets the other shoe drop. Folks up the ridge called about a helicopter scaring their goats last night. Private bird. No lights. He says it like there's a target there if I want one. You see anyone who thinks your place is, valuable. The word thuds between us. I lift one shoulder. The ocean groans over stone. Value's a two-sided thing, I say. What it gives, what it costs. Good answer, he says, meaning non-answer. He touches the brim of his hat, then the cruiser's fender, like it might bless him, and climbs in. The motor grumbles awake. He starts to reverse, then stops. You take care of that dog. She takes care of me. Then you both take care of this rock, he says, and eases back up the track. Ember stays statue still until the cruiser is a smear of dust at the lip, then breaks posture and trots to the dock edge. She doesn't look at me. She scans the seam where sea meets stone like a sentry checking a fence line after visitors. The wind carries something new. Cologne so clean it smells like the idea of water, and the high, expensive note of waxed leather. A second vehicle noses into the yard. Not county, not practical. Black paint polished to a missionary shine. Tires too smooth for this road. Door swings. and a man closes weather off him by existing. Tailored, handsome, hair combed by a helicopter even when there isn't one in the sky. Mr. Mercer, he says with a warmth that reheats itself as it travels. Vale, I represent parties who value stewardship. Those old rocks of yours. His gaze flicks to the shack, the ledge, the long horizon. They can do a lot of good in the right hands. Ember steps between us without sound and holds. Vale's smile grows a size it can't afford. He keeps it anyway. I'm prepared to make this easy, he says, voice soft with a confidence that expects applause. 2 commas easy. The wind lifts, salt cutting the sweetness right out of his aftershave. I keep my face calm and my hands light and my dog in my periphery. The ledge hums underfoot like it knows a sales pitch when it hears one. Vale doesn't bother with the view. He appraises the ledge the way a jeweler weighs a stone. Angles, occlusions, what the world will pay to own the glitter. Old rocks, new vision, he says, voice kept low so I have to stand closer than I want. We buy headaches, we turn them into harbours. You hold a key. Let me unlock the right door. Ember shifts her weight until her chest touches my shin. The wind lifts a piece of Vale's hair and lays it exactly back where it started, like the weather is on staff. He opens a slim folio and a number smiles up at me, all commas and confidence. You'll walk away solvent, anonymous and dry, he says. We'll handle the paperwork. You can keep the dog. That last line is rehearsed. Used to work on someone else. Ember takes one deliberate step forward and plants herself between Vale's shoes and mine. No flash of teeth, no sound, just the full decision of a shepherd who knows what she is for. Vale's smile freezes a millimeter too wide, then returns to factory settings. Dogs, he says lightly, not looking at her. Always certain of right and wrong. You'll learn that markets, Mr. Mercer, are more nuanced. I don't sell watches, I say. I stand them. He tastes the sentence like he's deciding if it will stain. If you won't sell, he says, the warmth pulling out of the words like a tide, we'll tidy up, sooner than you think. He pockets the folio, but not the threat, and turns for his car. No door slam, just the hush of good hinges. When the engine breathes, the radio on his dash murmurs something then stills, as if it asked a question and got the answer it wanted. The air changes, less salt, more iron. Ember flicks her ears and looks not at the road, but at the shack's shadow. The boathouse light, dead a minute ago, pricks once, stutters and holds. That's not our switch. That's a hand we didn't invite. I kill the topside breakers, and we drop back into granite and gravity. Ember takes the ladder so quick, I barely hear paw on rung. The station greets us with a slow resuming hum, the kind a sleeping animal makes when it decides it trusts you enough to wake. On the main busboard, the power trace shows a ripple, half-second dip, then smooth. Not internal, external. Someone touched the skin. Elliot, I say without thinking. Who else did you give this address to? Ember is already down the side corridor, low and long, nose skimming, handrail height. She stops at the auxiliary hatch we checked an hour ago and breathes the seam like a sommelier. I catch it a beat later. Oil, salt, and something bitter that doesn't belong to boats. A reagent bite that wants to be invisible. The cut of a tool, not the leak of a pipe. I lock the hatch dogs, then stand there with my hand on steel until the skin of the room tells me what it wants me to know. Whatever tested the door earlier isn't pressed to it now. Back at the console, I pull camera logs Elliot's system shouldn't even have. Copper and glass eyes you'd never notice unless you were looking for them in a museum. The feed hums to life in green and ash. We didn't power these optics. They powered themselves when we put heart back in the place. Timestamps march backwards. Storm haze. Empty hall. Then A human smear slides along the corridor wall like a thought it doesn't want to be caught thinking. No face, no name, just shoulder, elbow, a turned head hidden by hood and discipline. The clock on the frame says the impossible. Hours before I brought the Tide key home, someone walked Elliot's hall. Ember's reflection is in the screen, ears up, tail straight as a mast. She gives one low, metronomic push of sound that says now, in any language. I lock the grid to local, throw the remote shunts closed, and pull the big orange cover over the mains like a blanket. If anyone upstream plans to blink our lights when it matters, they'll find their fingers pressing glass. The journal waits, oilcloth cold under my palm. I open to the page with Elliot's tight engineer's hand, and a margin note easily missed unless you've had your life saved by caution. Deter, not a weapon, a wall. Throat geometry matters. 30 seconds buys minutes. Minutes buy lives. There's a sketch of transducers mounted in a tunnel I know now, with frequency bands penned like psalms. Elliot was not naive. He simply refused to turn listening into aim. Copy that, I tell the dead man. Ember noses the edge of the paper like she likes the tone. The barometer needle on Elliot's brass gauge inches left, a crawl you'd miss if you didn't live by needles. The sky beyond the ventilation slot has lost its blue. It isn't grey yet, it's the colour of doubt. The wind has a different shoulder in it. The comms lamp blinks once, not with the urgency of a call, but with the practiced politeness of a houseguest. I tap monitor only. Text walks into the room with its shoes off. Keep torch passive. Friendly ears still up. I want to ask the only questions worth asking. Who, where, how long, and know the only answer I'll get is silence with a hint of promise. Elliot left a path. Others tend it. We are not singular. That's comfort and calculus. Ember abandons her bed without being told and chooses the sea door as if it's a post she's always owned. She lies sphinx straight, chin on paws, nose pointing at the lock that opens to the short throat of rock. Her eyes don't blink enough to be comfortable. I bring water. She doesn't drink. I inventory like a man who understood once what worst case means. Batteries, green. Cooling loop, holds. Tidal regulators, singing like 1,000 turning prayers. Deter. Safe. Guarded. At the cost of a bruise on anyone who mistakes our door for theirs. I rack a short band radio for topside and tape a spare to the hatch frame. Then write 3 words on Elliot's chalkboard, because sometimes men need to see their job even when they're inside of it. Listen. Witness. Protect. Valuable things attract tidy men. Tidy men hire messy ones. I copy Elliot's index cards. Tide tables, array geometries, a single page headed lifeguard tower, not Lance. The phrase knocks the wind into place. Footfall memory rolls. Around the room. The sense of 2 pairs in this hall decades apart. Elliot and Kaiser. Then a long sleep. Now me and the dog with a different name and the same job. A lineage of listening. I check the geofence Elliot drew across the shelf like a chalk circle. The ring is quiet. The ocean is not. Far south, a set of merchants tick their metronomic progress. East, a navy hull practices. Her screw sign, an old friend's laugh. And underneath that, nearly out of hearing, a shape holds still the way hunters do, not motionless, but so deliberate it reads as sea. I reduce gain. The shape gently redraws itself into the noise, polite as a guest pretending not to eavesdrop. Not today, I say to it, the way you say it to a thought you'll handle when you're ready. On the top deck, the sky lowers its voice. The air has more spine. I step outside to read the horizon, the way Elliot taught himself to, not with eyes, with skin. Out west, a hard line forms, not cloud, geometry. The smell moves from brine to iron. Ember comes up beside me, puts her shoulder into my calf, and breathes slow until mine matches hers. I didn't tell her I needed that. She didn't need telling. The wind carries rotor wash long before it offers a chopper. I look up into a blank ceiling, seeing with ears. The sound fades, not overhead, offshore. Someone drew a circle that doesn't include us, yet. Back below, Sheriff Pike's patched tire lives in my head, beside the way his hand hovered near nothing in particular. He's a weather vane with a badge, the kind that points toward the strongest wind. Maybe he'll call this in. Maybe he'll sell it. Maybe both. I set Dieter to standby, not live. The throat transducers sit in their brackets like bells that only sing if you ask wrong. I run a test at whisper level, barely a hum, and feel the corridor vibrate in my bones, not my ears. Ember lifts her head, blinks once, then puts her muzzle back on her paws. She is cataloguing that note now among the rest of the worlds. The comms lamp breathes again. Keep passive. No signature, just the advice of someone who's read enough nights. I touch the key on instinct, as if that can count as reply. The lights dim a notch, then return, not a sag. An external hand making the grid look at itself in a mirror. Ember is on her feet, before my eyes catch up. Her body pointed not at the panel, but at the ceiling, as if the interference has direction. I run a quick manual trim on the governor, narrowing the deadband so a dirty push won't tip us into a stutter. The hum steadies. The old man's systems, like hands. I string a short run of braided line from the comms desk to the C door. A leash, not for Ember, for me. If smoke comes, or darkness, or just the confusion of too much sound, I will need something I can hold that leads to the only exit a dog trusts. I make up 2 dry packs. Journal excerpts, drive clones, a brass key that remembers other locks. I tape one under the lip of the console, wedge the other in the vent above the galley where human eyes won't go, but an investigator's will. If someone takes the room, they won't take the story. In the silence between machine breaths, the station gives me a sound I haven't heard before. A low, organ-deep note that isn't Dieter, isn't grid, isn't wind trying doors. It's the granite itself, pressure-finding lyric. The barometer needle slides another hair left. We are close to the part of the song that knocks. Ember stands, no preamble. She turns her head toward the west wall as if the ocean said her name. When she looks at me, I see the decision that comes before the act. I thumb the intercom to topside and speak to no one, and to anyone who can hear. Tidermarrow is on passive watch. Torch lit. Weather building. If you're friendly, keep listening. The reply isn't a voice. It's a tremor. The first true fist of a squall landing flat against the cliff and sending a shudder down to steel. Dust lifts off forgotten ledges and hangs in the air like memory. The lights hold. Ember doesn't flinch. The ocean takes a breath so large the room seems to get smaller. Rain arrives all at once, not in drops, in sheets, hammering the trap above with the unanimity of an army finding the gate. The station's dampers wake and hum a note that sits in my ribs. Somewhere far out, the cautious shape that pretended to be weather will find the storm's shadow to hide in. I lay my palm on the brass plaque Elliot bolted to the console and feel the words the way you feel a pulse. Use it to protect, not to profit. The letters are cold and honest. Ember touches her nose to my wrist, then returns to the C door and sets her body like a line drawn across a threshold. On watch, I tell the empty hall. The hall answers with thunder that isn't sky. The first wave hits like artillery, and the ledge sings. We have company coming, the old kind, with water and wind and teeth. If the other kind rides in its pockets, we'll know soon enough. Ember doesn't look back. She has the next 7 minutes written in her body. Hold, listen, wait for the knock that isn't a knock. I breathe with her. The weather takes the rest of the room. The storm arrives like an army. Waves march in ranks, iron-booted, and every heel strike lands on Tidermarrow's ribs. The mass dampers wake with a basso moan. Dust freckles lift into the air and hover like breath in winter. Steel answers granite. Granite answers C, and the whole room becomes a drum you feel before you hear. The geofence pings. A vessel ghosts. No AIS, no name, just a thin, deliberate smear edging around the weather the way a poacher skirts a fence line. I tight frame the ring. The trace dimples the perimeter and lingers, as if sniffing for a latch. Ember looks up without moving her body. That's how she says we have company. On the array, a small sub rides the trench like a shark under a dock. Not navy grey, its signature is too careful, its screw too polite. It holds in the shadow of the canyon wall, using the storm as a hood. I bleed the gain down and let the sea do the talking. The shape reappears when I stop staring, the way coy animals will cross a path only when you look away. 3 precise taps move through stone, not loud, not for us, at us. Ping, 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 patient as a surveyor. I pull Elliot's mud filter onto the input and the storm steps aside like a curtain. The taps get taller on the scope. Someone is painting our wall to learn where it flexes. Ember's head cocks to the left, right on the rhythm. The shepherd has metronome ears. Our uplink dies. Veils cut, clean. The board gives me that too perfect silence that says a gentleman closed a door and smiled doing it. I don't swear. I flip Elliot's buried path. Copper in bedrock, a signal that prefers caves to sky. The modem handshakes with the patience of old equipment, and then the status lamp returns with a small green yes. Quiet ears are still with us. Passive torch, I tell the room. Not because the room needs reminding, but because I do. The brass plaque under my hand is cold, and the letters are truer in weather. Use it to protect, not to profit. Ember refuses to leave the sea door. She eases her chest to the deck like a rifleman finding bone on stone, nose pointed at the hatch that opens into the throat of the island. I set a calm hand between her shoulders. Her breathing is slow, but the muscles along her spine are strung wire. She doesn't smell fear. She smells intent. I can feel it climb her fur. A cone of light crawls water. It starts as a glow on the scope, just a brightness where black should be, then becomes the slow sweep of a diver's lamp, feeling the underlip of the rock. Not brave. Paid. 2 beams now, then 3, crossing and recrossing like careful handwriting. On the mic, you can hear the storm eating itself, but beneath the roar, there's a soft, human rasp, air cycling through a rebreather, somewhere in the tunnel's mouth. I thumb deter to warm, and let the array hold its breath. 30 seconds of the right song in the right throat can turn courage to nausea without making ghosts. I take 1 step closer to Ember and feel the deck vibrate on a frequency that makes my teeth feel tall. The trench sub nudges forward a yard, patient as hunger. The topside trace, our nameless boat, slides deeper into the lee, like a spider tucking into the corner of a web. Not hunters, I say, mostly to myself, mostly to the man who taught me this place. Watchman. Ember doesn't answer, but her ears lock into a V and stay there. Outside, the cone of light returns to the seam in the stone and lingers as if it's reading a nameplate. I can almost hear the diver counting inches with his fingers, measuring a door he doesn't know is a door. The mass dampers groan again, weather finding a new shoulder, and every cable in the ceiling hums like strings drawn across a bow. The geofence pings a single courteous chime and holds. The boat doesn't depart. It commits. I uncap the red wax on the manual governor and trim the band tighter still. If they try to trip us into a stutter, right as they knock, they'll get a steady light instead of a flicker. The taps repeat. 3. Pause. 3. Closer. 3. There. I lay my palm to the wall and feel them in bone. Elliot's margin note floats up from memory. Throat geometry matters. 30 buys minutes. Minutes buy lives. I look at Ember. She's already chosen the next thing. On me, I whisper, though we aren't moving, and her tail gives one slow, grounded thump The kind that means I've got the door. You have the room. The diver's lamp brightens, goes white hot on the scope, and the trench sub's shadow opens its mouth a little wider. I breathe once, deep, in time with the weather. Then I set my fingers on the brass knob Elliot labelled Deter and wait for the exact second they decide they know our wall. The station listens with me, the storm approves, and the light outside keeps crawling. I roll Deter up one click. The station clears its throat, low, cathedral deep, and the tunnel sings back with a note you feel in teeth and knees. It isn't volume that does it, it's geometry. The wave folds on itself in that carved throat and turns bravado into seasickness without making martyrs. The diver's lamp stutters on the scope, wavers, then slides off the seam like a hand that suddenly remembers it left the stove on. Somewhere inside steel, a wrench hits floor plate. Somebody swears into a regulator. Ember holds the sea door as if it's the only thing keeping the room square. The hairs along her spine lay down a notch. Respect, not relief. I keep the knob at warm and let the rock hum just enough to buy minutes. Minutes are the only currency that ever matters. She leaves the hatch before I ask. Pads past cabling and conduit, over to a section of wall I've walked by a dozen times without seeing. Her nose works along the seam, short, decisive breaths. Then she braces a shoulder and looks back at me. Not a whine, an order. I sweep my fingers along the panel she chose, dull rivets, no label, and feel the tiniest draft where there shouldn't be one. 2 screws are hand-polished in a way only a human's nervous habit can make. I twist them out and the panel gives a sulky sigh, then hinges open on oiled pins. Behind it, a narrow maintenance crawl drops into black, just wide enough for a man and a dog if they don't mind the smell of old pitch and salt. No blueprint ever showed this. Elliot didn't draw everything he built. Ember knew before I did. She lowers her chest to the deck, head hovering over that dark rectangle like a medic over a wound. Not for now, her posture says, for when the room lies. The radio coughs from 3 different speakers at once, VHF, the hardline, and Elliot's stone-fed lash-up, like a choir that never rehearsed together. A clipped voice shoves through wind, "You will not be allowed to depart," and the rest becomes static-shaped like intent. It isn't Vale's varnished tenor. It isn't the ranger quiet voice from the friendly channel either. The jam is surgical, a blanket thrown just across the part of the band that carries permission. The outer lock announces itself with a sound older than electricity, steel flexing under a tool that knows exactly how far to push. Deter hum buys less now. Adrenaline outruns nausea. Ember flows low and fast before I can name it. Shadow, muscle, decision. Her paws barely kiss deck as she takes the corner and becomes motion with teeth at the end. The first man in the hatch is careful, rifle high, muzzle a metronome. But he presents a knee because knees are always the tax you pay for forward. Ember hits it with everything she has, and physics does what it always does. The rifle stripes the ceiling, shot smacks harmless sparks off duct, and my second arrives, the only second I asked her for. I'm already moving. A flashbang pucks the grate and goes quiet under the hum. Eyes! I warn out of habit and blink on instinct. The world snaps white, then returns bruised and ringing. 2 silhouettes fold back through the hatch, all elbows and sudden humility. I sweep the rifle to center mass and stop my finger at bone-deep memory. Protect, not profit. Even in storms, the plaque is a hand on my shoulder. The board glitches, once, twice, like a heartbeat stepping out of time. Alarms stack, power, coolant, external pressure. Each one small on its own, together a choir you don't want to conduct. The mass dampers moan like a barge line under too much pull. If the governor steps wide even half a beat, the racks cook, and Elliot's ears die young. I roll to manual, thumb the red wax seal I swore I wouldn't break unless he told me himself, and narrow the band until the needles stop thinking about dancing. Stay with me, I tell the old inverter. It answers with a steady, stubborn hum I recognize from a man who built in storms. Vale's voice arrives from the hatch behind his men, slick sanded off by weather. "Open the bay, Mercer!" No hello, no pretense. His silhouette is a cutout, helmet, headset, impatience. He pushes a sidearm toward the data cage like a pistol can convince math to lie. "We're done listening." Ember shows him her teeth without noise, the kind of smile that makes a hand rethink its day. I ignore him. The hum in the tunnel is working, but not forever, and I need a lever that isn't sound. Elliot left levers everywhere. You just have to ask the right drawer. The console's face has 4 brass pulls, 3 bright from use, 1 filmed with age. I take the dusty one. It sticks, then surrenders a 1/2 inch. Inside, a warren of paper, oilskin wrapped, corners rounded by years of being read without permission. A small brass key rides the bundle like a captain on a prow. I break the string, spread, pages against the console glass, and the storm in my chest tilts back to awe, not R&D, not a spyglass, a lifeguard tower. Tidermarrow, Coastal Civil Acoustics Sentinel, pilot. Elliot's tidy script threads between typed lines he was never supposed to keep. Diagrams of array lobes fanned like petals along the shelf. Handwritten overlays. Shipping lanes, whale corridors, landslide harmonics, the way tsunamis hide in the long bass notes hours before a crest. Margins full of relief frequencies, the ones he meant for doors and crowds, not throats and hearts. A network map with dots every 100 miles, some circled, some crossed out, and a single line beneath it. Torch relays. Listen, warned Shepard. He'd wired help into the coastline and called it by a name men in offices would never choose. Watch. The quiet channel, the one that told us to hold passive, wasn't a spook's whisper. It was a promise kept by strangers with similar plaques. Vale doesn't see any of that. He sees only the drive bay behind the paper, and his world is too small for anything that doesn't invoice. "Last chance," he says, shoving the muzzle through the bars like a child poking a zoo. His men brace again at the hatch, fighting their stomachs, will outrunning wisdom. The alarms climb a note. Water pressure kisses a threshold on the lower gauge and lingers there, flirtatious and fatal. The geofence pings once, then holds its breath. Ember shifts her weight just enough to keep the rifleman's muzzle pinned at the ceiling with nothing but her stare. I slide a single page free, tidal purge, manual override, and lay it beside the drive cage. Elliot's plan isn't about winning a fight. It's about buying rescue enough runway to land. Every line in the margin is a man telling his grandson, "Don't make ghosts, make time." I meet Vale's eyes through the bars and talk to the room, to the storm, to the brass plaque, and the dog who made this all possible. "We're not hunters," I say. "We're watchmen." And then I reach for the lever, Elliot labelled Shepard, local, the one he underlined twice, and let the tower be what it was built to be. Vale presses the muzzle into the bars until steel complains. "Open the bay, Mercer." The words are flat, businesslike, as if he's ordering room service instead of trying to requisition a coastline. I keep my hands where he can see them and my eyes where he can't. On the small brass tag Elliot stamped inside the cage, Shepard, local, already thrown. The system hum has shifted. Valves thinking, gates waking. A logic older than me counting down behind the panels. Ember's head lifts a 1/2 inch. She samples the air with short, precise breaths, then peels off from the standoff and tracks a line along the lower bulkhead. When she stops, it's at a drain lip most men would miss. Her tongue flicks against her palate. Her ears tip back. There's a new scent riding the salt, the sweet plastic bitter of accelerant. "Fuel," I say, because Vale understands simple nouns. "You torch what you can't buy." He doesn't blink. "We erase what shouldn't exist." "History disagrees with you," I answer. But the room doesn't care about arguments. It cares about pressure and current, and the way sound climbs bone. A voice arrives ahead of its owner, amped up to survive wind and ego. "Step away from that equipment," Sheriff Pike's words slap metal before his boots do. He crowds the hatch behind Vale's men like he built the tunnel, badge high, pistol higher. Snow beads melt on his mustache and die on the floor in tiny hisses. "Sheriff," Vale says without warmth, "you're off your pasture." Pike gives him a smile that isn't one. "Emergency order, county authority. All assets on this ledge are impounded." He lets that last word hang there like bait in a muddy river. Impounded doesn't mean protected. It means mine. Vale doesn't lower the gun. Pike doesn't either. The tunnel hum keeps its steady headache. I stand between a man who invoices disasters and a man who farms them for power. Ember eases back to my leg and locks her stare on whichever muzzle moves first. The station chooses to make it dramatic. Waves hit the granite with the rhythm of a slow fist. The lights strobe as mass dampers work to keep the ribs from singing themselves apart. Spray mist filters through the outer seam and hangs in the air like ghosted breath. For a heartbeat, it's exactly like a firefight from another life. 3 angles, no cover, everybody convinced they're the center of the geometry. Then the old CRT hisses to life on its own. Green letters bleeding through static, like truth under bad ink. Tidal purge, Uro2. A soft relay clicks somewhere behind the console, faithful as a metronome. 2 minutes. Elliot never trusted men to do the right thing while arguing about it. He gave water the vote. "What did you do?" Pike barks, as if I threw a switch that means flood all liars. "Not me," I say, eyes on the countdown. "The tower. It was built to survive people like us." Vale shoves the pistol harder between the bars, as if proximity could bully physics. "Open it. Now." I lay a palm on the cage so he can feel how steady my hand is. "You can shoot the drive," I say, "and it'll still remember more than you will." One of Vale's men loses his lunch into his mask and staggers. The Dieter hum is good at reminding bodies they arrived in the wrong story. Pike flinches at the wretch, then refocuses on the only currency he trusts. "Mercer, you and the mutt step aside. I'll secure the evidence." "From whom?" I ask. "From him?" I nod at Vale. "Or for him." The CRT ticks to 0127. Ember makes the decision for us. She noses my thigh hard enough to bruise, then sprints for the maintenance panel she found earlier, the unmarked square with hand-polished screws. She plants both paws on the lip and looks back, eyes bright, tail fixed level. The dog isn't asking. She's briefing. "Move," I tell them, but I'm not sure who I'm telling because I'm already crossing the room, already wrenching the panel wide. Cold air slides out like a rumour. The crawl falls steep, knee-deep water already jostling the ladder rungs, tasting the room. Hungry. Pike tries to reassert gravity. "No one leaves. This is a crime scene." "Then arrest the ocean," I say, and swing down the first 3 rungs. The flood kisses my calves with a temperature that makes bones swear. Ember drops beside me without hesitation, shoulders brushing steel, muzzle just above the black line. She points her chest into the flow and takes it. Behind us, boots shuffle indecisively. Vale's calculus is visible even in silhouette: control versus survival, data versus drowning. Pike chooses wrong first. "Back out," he orders, and the station shrugs at him and ticks to 0058. The crawlway is a throat I don't remember from any drawing. Elliot's private artery, cut to be used once, maybe twice, in a life. The walls are close enough to scrape knuckles. Tar smell sings with the copper tang of old water. Ember never checks back. She trusts that I'll be where she needs me and spends all her attention forward, reading the microcurrents with whiskers and will. A pressure wave thumps through the steel, the kind you feel in fillings, and the crawl darkens for 2 beats as the main room shunts its lights to keep the pumps honest. In that brief eclipse, sound becomes everything. The rush of new water finding old corners, the faraway whine of a tool discarded in a hurry, the tunnel's long, low note answering rock. The horn threads the noise so gently, At first, I think my head invented it. A mournful, single pitch smoothed by fog and distance. It rides the storm like a handwriting I want to recognize. Ember hears it a half-second before me and lifts her ears without breaking stride. Hope is a dangerous chemical. I let a measured dose in. The crawl kinks right, then drops again. We slosh through arms' lengths of chill and time. My breath ghosts against steel. The page in my head with Elliot's neat script flips by itself. Torch relays. Listen, warn Shepherd. I key the throat mic with my teeth, the oldest channel we have still alive under the jam. A voice, as calm as a doctor's hand, finds us in the static. Hold the torch. It is not a question. It is a promise. For one bright second, I picture rotors cutting rain, orange baskets, gloved hands. Then the station reminds me, rescue arrives to what survives. Sparks sneeze from the conduit above my shoulder, small, impatient fireflies falling into a world that shouldn't feed them. One lands on a strand of oakum long dried into tinder by a decade of good intentions. The smolder runs the fibre like a fuse, finds an old smear of pitch and decides to become a story. Heat blooms at ear level, hungry, cheerful, wrong. Go, I tell the dog, and the dog goes, deeper into Elliot's last artery, into black water that doesn't care about authority or invoices, or the way men decide what should exist. Behind us, fire takes the air we plan to use. The horn sounds again, closer, louder, real. The countdown I can't see anymore keeps falling. Between the two, the ledge sings its oldest song, Choose Now. The first flame is a shrug, just a lazy orange lick riding a thread of oakum. Then it remembers its job and blooms. Heat climbs the crawl like a living thing that wants a name. Pitch that slept for decades wakes in a breath and turns the corridor into a fuse. The horn outside keeps calling, closer, clearer, and that calm voice on the net repeats itself through static. Hold the torch, not a suggestion, a spine. We reach a junction where Elliot's machine room shoulders the crawl. A square of tempered glass shows the heart of it, the vault belly with the core stack nested like vertebrae. A brass pull ring gleams under emergency paint. Pull to extract, manual. Right below it, in smaller, meaner letters, purge override disables shielding. Elliot left me a choice that isn't a puzzle so much as a measure of the man who takes it. Ember stops with me, not a flinch in her posture, not a tremor in her breath. The water at our shins is colder. The smoke at our faces is thicker. She leans her shoulder into my leg, a weight that feels like a verdict and a promise. I hook 2 fingers under the ring, then let them fall away. You don't make the job a weapon, I tell Elliot out loud, because there should be a witness, even if it's just a dog. I palm the secondary latch instead, seal, shroud, sleep, and drive it home. The vault's iris slides shut with a sound like a camera remembering how to protect light. Somewhere behind us, a relay clicks approval, and the purge logic nods to itself. The secret will wait for a world that deserves it, or it won't. The living come first. Ember plants harder at my knee, as if to say, good. Now move. We push on. The crawl kinks, lowers. My thighs burn, the water steals heat like a thief who knows your habits. A shadow shoulders into the hatch behind us and collapses against the rib. Veil. The sharp white of his shirt is ruined with red at the seam of his coat. A ragged scrape prints his temple where steel kissed him on the way down. Mercer, he manages, and the voice doesn't belong to his suits. It belongs to a boy who didn't plan far enough ahead. Don't leave me. He's lost his pistol. His teeth chatter on pride. He could die in this throat in minutes and turn into a problem for the sea. Ember glances back once, not a growl, just an inventory, wounded, scared, still a man. On your knees, I tell him, but my hand is already under his elbow. Crawl when I crawl. Stop when I stop. If you touch the dog, you go backwards. He nods like a student who finally respects the syllabus. I wedge him into the sequence. Ember, first, me, Vale. And we take the crawl the way a team takes a hallway when the roof is low and the bad news is already inside. The floor sloshes to mid-calf, then thigh. The island is swallowing its heart one cold swallow at a time. Sounds layer. Distance boom of surf hitting a geometry it hates. The wild soar of wind through cliff grass, and under it all the station's long sorrowful hum, like a church organ holding a note no one wrote. A second silhouette jams into the hatch behind Vale, curses, and wriggles in. Sheriff Pike, hat gone, badge hung crooked, jaw set, like he's about to auction off the Atlantic. "This is my county," he grinds, as if jurisdiction can argue with water. "Congratulations," I say. "You get to evacuate it." I tap the back of Vale's boot. "Move." We reach a grate that bleeds daylight, thin, slate-coloured, promising. Ember noses the seam, tests the pressure, then sets her teeth gently on the lower lip and worries it like cloth. The screws give with human history. I shoulder in beside her, get 3 fingers under steel, and together we roll the mouth wide enough for a dog, a man, and his sins. The horn above is loud enough now to write its letters on the skin. Rotor wash chews, rain into mist. The pulse hits the rock and comes back staccato. The voice that said, "Hold the torch," returns with authority. You can hear, even without rank. Seawolf control. This is federal air. Visual on cliff access. Show me your light. I kill my lamp, then thumb it back on in a single slow blink. 1, 2, 3, and aim it down the throat instead of up. The ledge doesn't need to see us. The air needs to know where we're going. Ember slips through first, a slick grey muscle disappearing into weather. I shove Vale up after her by his belt. Pike follows with a grunt that could be law or an apology. I come last, shoulders scraping steel, lungs grabbing at air that smells like salt, diesel, and money spending itself. We belly onto a narrow run, cut into the cliff face, ankle deep in runoff. The world is all knives, rain like needles, rock like teeth, wind like a drill sergeant you didn't outrun. Above us, the helicopter slashes the sky into segments, its searchlights sweeping the granite as if it were reading an old story written in water. A second bird ghosts the first, darker, heavier, and the loudhailer slaps voice onto stone. "Hands where we can see them. Move toward the beacon." Before I can answer, a third light blooms at human height, jittery, brave, handheld. A woman half-soaked in a storm jacket plants herself at the cliff edge with a phone on a gimbal and a face that does not blink. "This is Maya Quinn, live from Tidermarrow Ledge," she says, voice steady enough to ride the wind. "If you're watching this, you're seeing a rescue and the end of a lie. The world is watching the watch." Vale hears it and makes a sound like a hinge between 2 lives. Pike hears it and recalculates what it means, to be on the wrong side of a lens. Ember hears it and doesn't care. Her eyes are on me, asking how we finish the job. We don't stop for interviews. "Up," I tell them, and herd the whole rotten triangle. Pike first because he hates it, Vale second because he needs it. Along the slick goat path toward a piece of fence line that looks newer than the rest. Ember leads with her head low and her tail level, scanning left, right, left in a cadence that used to be my heartbeat. Twice she stalls and anchors, and twice I follow her nose around a patch of rock that would have taken a man over the lip if he thought the path was his idea. Behind us, the station voices its final opinion. A deep, hollow whomp blooms underground as the purge completes. A gout of steam and smoke belches from a fracture in the cliff and is snatched sideways by the wind. The light in the helicopter jumps, the loudhailer steadies. "I have heat signatures. 4 individuals, 1 canine. Keep coming, you're doing fine." We crest a last rib of slick basalt and the cliff opens into a wind-scoured bowl where men in orange and blue invent order out of chaos. Ropes flick, stretchers open like books. Ember pauses at the lip, checks each shape with that clinical, tender stare she reserves for triage. She picks a lane through bodies and gear that keeps her close enough to protect me and far enough to respect theirs. She's done this before in another country, with another name. I lean into her shoulder for half a breath I don't have time for, then push. Go on, I tell the rescuers. He's bleeding. I jerk a chin at Vale. And he's dangerous. Treat him like both. Vale looks at me like a man who can't quite reconcile mercy with math. Sheriff Pike sets his jaw for cameras and consequence. Maya keeps talking to the world through rain, her lens merciless and kind. You're seeing the dog, Ember. Lead them out, she says, because she knows the headline, because the truth deserves a face that isn't mine. And still, Ember is working. She sniffs the wind, then breaks left, nose down, tail level again, last tunnel, and I understand. There are still men below who think story is something you can drown. We're not done until every living thing inside that rock has a way out, or a choice to stay. Show me, I say, and we go again. Ember breaks from the rescue bowl and noses into a seam of shadow where the cliff curls on itself. She looks back once, eyes bright, and I understand. Not done. Not yet. I wave 2 EMTs to hold position and slide after her, scraping knuckles, tasting rust. The wind shreds my name off my lips. She doesn't wait. She threads the rock like a needle, finding the last stitch. The passage breathes salt and smoke. Far below, the station groans, a long, tired hinge. We belly around a bend, and the beam of my lamp paints 3 figures huddled on a grating. 2 divers in half-flooded suits and a tech with a split scalp blinking through, blood and rain. Ember stops a foot short, tail level, nose working, not threat, triage. Hey, I say, calm because panic wastes oxygen. You're coming up, masks first. One diver shakes his head once, shame and relief in the same motion. Orders, he rasps. It doesn't matter. Orders changed, I tell him. Move. We pass regulators forward. Ember leans into the tech's thigh so he remembers his legs. When he wobbles, she leans harder, a wedge cut from loyalty itself. The tide lifts beneath the grate, cold hands grabbing at ankles. We time it. 3 breaths, a swell, hands under elbows. And the first man clears the lip into the climb. The second follows, coughing into his mask. I put the tech between me and Ember, my palm flat on his spine. Up, do not look back. Behind us, the island makes a decision. Rock drops like a trapdoor. Fire and water punch each other in the throat. The shockwave slaps our backs and turns my lamp into a whirling star field. Dust becomes night. The sound steals language. All that's left is counting. 1 hand, then the other. 1 boot, then the other. Don't stop where the fear feels honest. The path narrows to a wet ledge where the wind tries to rent space in your ribs. The tech slips. I catch a handful of jacket. The ocean takes my knees anyway. Ember is on me before I can cuss, teeth neat on my sleeve, a tug that is half command, half promise. She growls low, not at the sea, at the part of me that wants to rest. I plant a boot on the rock she has chosen and stand up inside that sound like it's a harness. We clear the pinch and the rescue bowl blooms again. Lights, hands, the organized chaos of people who chose the right kind of hard life. Voices meet us. Ropes cradle the divers. A medic clamps the tech's scalp with calm, clever fingers. Ember stations at my hip until every last one of them is tagged, swaddled, human again. Only then does she release my sleeve. Vale is upright now, pale and sweating under a foil blanket, sermonizing excuses to anyone with a clipboard. The FBI team moves like winter, efficient, everywhere. Cuffs click. Vale tries to square his shoulders, tries to remember the old smile. An agent in a soaked ball cap doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. Silas Vale, you're under arrest. He leans just enough for only the two of us to hear the rest. And Mercer, this isn't over. Not a threat, an audit. The syndicate he represents has more names than one suit and more doors than one island. Sheriff Pike watches his jurisdiction walk away on federal boot heels. His mouth is a straight blade. His eyes cut angles at cameras and at conscience. He meets mine, and what he says is simple and, for once, true. You kept them alive. The rest of the sentence stays in his teeth. Then the weather relents an inch, and you realize your hands are shaking only because you finally can. A firefighter kneels to Ember's level and calls her a hero. She doesn't preen for the lens or the applause. She leans into me, checks my pulse with her eyes, and tastes my knuckles with a quick, practical kiss that says, "Drink water, breathe slower." Someone drapes a towel over her shoulders, and she grumbles at the indignity until I tuck it into a cape and salute. She accepts the bit because I laugh, and my laugh tells her the wolves in my chest are sleeping. Maya stands at the periphery, rain matting hair to cheekbones, phone steady on a world that needs to remember. She doesn't shove the camera into my face. She doesn't have to. She holds out a small, salt-stiff rectangle, edges curled, colours thinned by time. "Found in a locker up top," she says. The photo is Elliot and Kaiser on this same ledge, the sun a white coin behind them. Kaiser's head is up. Elliot's hand is on the brass railing that isn't there anymore. The smiles are small and private, the kind you wear when the sea just told you a secret it knows you will keep. I don't expect the tears. They arrive without permission, warm in the cold, clean as a new tide. I don't hide them. There's no one left to impress, and the person who needed me to be made of stone is dead. I lay the old picture beside Ember's wet paw. She looks at it, then at me, and gives the softest wuff, as if recognizing family through generations of salt. By dawn, the storm has finished writing its name across the coast. Steam threads from the fractured cliff where the station exhaled the last of itself. The smell is charcoal and iodine, old rope and new rain. Rigs and rigsmen coil lines. Medevacs thrum away with their precious breathing cargo. The bowl empties until quiet is a person again, not a threat. We find a flat tongue of rock that faces east. Ember folds her legs and presses her shoulder to my hip. I lie back and let the cold reach what the heat missed. Gulls draw calligraphy in the red light. The horizon is a single, deliberate line, and it feels like a promise I'm old enough to believe. A new watch starts now, I tell the dog, the ledge, the ghost of a man who understood that listening is work. Ember answers by doing nothing grand at all, just breathing with me until our rhythms match, then resting her chin across my ribs like a paperweight to keep me from blowing away. The phone in Maya's pocket buzzes somewhere behind us, a world waking, headlines sharpening, lawyers rehearsing. The agent's warning echoes once and fades. We'll have more doors to open. We'll have days when the ocean is loud and men are louder. But for this minute, the only sound that matters is the small, faithful metronome in Ember's chest and the low, endless conversation of the sea. Because the sea never stops talking. And somewhere under that calm water, behind heat-scarred stone and the hush of silt, another voice is still answering our light.